Welcome to Confessions of an EOS Implementer, a podcast by Talent Harbor. We share unique stories of EOS implementers and the companies they've transformed to give you a rare glimpse into the successes and the challenges of the system in action. I'm your host, Ryan Hogan. Let's jump in. Welcome to Confessions of an EOS Implementer. I think everybody here probably already knows Tom. And so Tom is not an EOS implementer. And so the question might be, what are we doing here? And I think we're changing things up. And, you know, what's interesting is you could look back on this and say, oh, they planned this all along. Like, where did Tom go? Now Tom's back and now he's doing a live cast. But Tom, welcome to the show and jumping right in. Where have you been? Where have you been for the last few weeks?
So this is presumably because you may have seen me on LinkedIn before, but then haven't for, it was about 7 weeks actually. So it's been such a roller coaster. I'll tell the story of pretty much all the details. If that's what you want, if that's what you think is going to be good.
I think it's going to be great. And I'm also deeply curious. I saw from the peripheral, I saw some of the emails. I think I even took action. I DM'd someone saying, let Tom out of jail, out of LinkedIn jail. We should clarify that. But give us the whole story. Yeah.
Okay. So the background here is that to grow a LinkedIn profile, you have to make sure, or to grow it fast. And I grew from 25,000 to 125,000 in 3 months. So to grow fast, you really have to make sure that every post that you post is a banger. And so the best way to do that is to not copy other people, but to understand what other posts in the past have done well, and then use that to inspire your posts. Now, anybody who's growing fast on LinkedIn is doing this. And everyone kind of understands that. No one copies each other word for word, but there may be some cases where you take the gist of the post and write it in your own words, right? So this was one of the strategies I was using and I used to go from 25 to 125K. Now, enter the character, which I'm kind of happy to name. I don't even know if she is really the person operating her profile. And we'll get to why I think that later. It's this lady called Bridget. I won't say her surname because I don't really want to call people out. Anyway, Bridget, absolute legend in the game. I must say first, 4 million followers, some absolute banger posts. And so in the HR space, big inspiration for me. And so I was obviously using her post as inspiration for some of mine. Now, Bridget didn't like this. It doesn't seem like she's playing the game that everyone else is. We'll get to why I think that later. And so Bridget made some complaints about my posts. Initially, I just kind of shrugged them off. I didn't really understand the impact of that. So then she made a couple more. And what this essentially led to was my profile being temporarily restricted because LinkedIn were taking those complaints at face value. They were believing the complaints. So as this happened, obviously the LinkedIn gets taken down about 7 or 8 weeks ago. And what follows is this 7-week journey of legal stress to eventually get it back. I'll pause here. Any questions before I jump into what and how we did and how we got it back?
I do, but I feel like it's going to take us off track. I'm curious of how you grew the profile. I'm curious of why you chose the HR space, but I want to save those for later because this story is already incredible, and I think we should finish this and then get into growth strategies for LinkedIn accounts.
Yeah, love that. So initially, my attempt to show LinkedIn that the first thing we did was just try to understand what's going on and understand Bridget and what she's been doing. And just through some rough Googling, I was able to clearly see that Bridget herself has been employing this technique to the extreme, e.g. for the last 4 to 5 years. Specifically of this one guy, another guy, I won't give the surname, but another big name on LinkedIn, 1.2 million followers, called Oleg. And so I was how can she make these complaints about me when she's copied these posts? And so I said that to LinkedIn. That didn't have any weight. No one really cared. I was with this lowish level support person. And again, I'm not slagging off LinkedIn. That didn't really, wasn't really giving me time of day. So I got the lawyer. We wrote the counter notice, which is what's called when someone makes a copyright complaint against you. This was ignored or rejected by LinkedIn. And so what they were basically saying is that you have to prove you have copyright over these posts at the time they were posted in order for you to get these complaints taken away. And so probably the stupidest thing I did was I went and actually got the 3 posts in question registered under copyright in the US, expedited. It cost $2,400 to do that, which was kind of a stupid thing because I sent them to LinkedIn to prove I had copyright, but then LinkedIn was like, well, you have to prove before the time they were posting it. So that was just idiotic, $2,400 down the drain. So then essentially where we came to with LinkedIn is that they said, you just have to get this lady, Bridget, to withdraw the complaints. And so at this point, I'm like, she has like never responded to anything that I've sent her, that my lawyers have sent her, like offering her cash, like 6 figures where we got to cash to withdraw the complaints. Didn't reply to anything. She was opening emails, but again, I don't know if that's her or her team. She's got 4 different email addresses. So then I'm like, okay, what else can we do to try and like get her attention? Because it's the only way I can get my profile back. So then we did a post from Fame LinkedIn asking people to message her, being like, can you respond to Tom? I think like 100 to 150 people messaged her, being like, can you respond to Tom? Absolutely nothing. Absolutely nothing. And so I'm like, okay, the future of my business career, because this is how important LinkedIn is for me, I think, is like in the hands of this lady. Like, what are we going to do? At this point, a second plan emerged. If we were aware that Bridget has been essentially copying these posts, what if we could reach out to the people who she'd been copying and then submit complaints against her? I know you need about 3 to 5 complaints in order for a profile to be temporarily restricted. That's what happened to me. So at this point, we'll be bringing Igor, who's like a Russian, like a deep web researcher. And so I'm like, Igor, can you just spend time and money working out how Bridget's been copying these posts? And we found probably like hundreds of examples from about 20 different people that she copied. And so then my job was to reach out to them to be like, can I be your authorized agent to submit copyright complaints against Bridget? As we were doing that, we discovered Oleg, this guy, and we discovered that there's about 50 examples where she copied Oleg. So I emailed Oleg and I'm like, Oleg, can I be your authorized agent to submit these against her? Oleg, absolute legend. He was like, yeah, do what you want. And so Oleg's absolute legend. He's kind of off the game. So I'll share this funny. Oleg Vishnopolsky, go and follow him. He's kind of doesn't post anymore, but his posts are OG, like level HR, viral bangers. So at this point, me and this Igor, the Russian researcher, like he's pretty significant. So we found another guy, developer, and used the LinkedIn API to export 2,000 Oleg posts, 2,000 Bridget posts, used AI to compare them, and that gave us these 53 examples that were like clear, or like some of them were altered copying, which is a legal term for like just moving words around or like changing words, and some of them were like blatant. And so then I submitted 53. You had to submit this long form. I personally submitted 53 of these copyright infringement notices against Bridget as Oleg's authorized agent. And only then did someone in LinkedIn be like, okay, what's going on here? Tom, what's the objective? And this is a guy called, I won't say his name, but a guy from LinkedIn support, absolute legend, really, really helpful. Actually, I took the time to understand the situation, and he didn't want a big dispute between 3 creators. So that's what he said. So he was like, Tom, why don't you resubmit your counter notice? And because he couldn't like tell me what to do because they can't really advise. But he's like, Tom, let's just like forget about this and maybe just resubmit your counter notice. And so I'm like, okay, I think that, so I speak to the lawyer and then we resubmit the counter notice, essentially saying that Bridget can't have copyright of these posts because of all these examples that she's taken from someone else. And then Mike, maybe I shouldn't say his name, this guy from LinkedIn support then issued the counter notices, which basically means that Bridget had 14 days or 10 business days to sue me, or the posts go up, and then if the posts go up, the profile has to go up. So that's essentially what happened. But very stressful, cost a lot of money, cost a lot of time. I still haven't heard anything from Bridget. What I hope is that Bridget doesn't do this to other people, because now she knows that we have this big database of examples that she has copied. So if she does, then we can submit them against her, and then she'd lose her profile. So I think we're a stalemate, but I don't know. I've never spoken to her. So
what's so there's a lot of things in there. One is you used a Russian investigator. Like how did this come about? Where you're just like, you know what? That's where we're going.
Yeah, because I found myself, I was like, it was Monday night, 9 p.m. and I'm like trying to, like, without a LinkedIn profile, I log into my girlfriends and to my assistants, like trying to do all this research. And I'm like, come on, there's someone better than this, me. So I went to Upwork and then just did like, I want like just a rep researcher, basically. This guy called Igor. And I'll put the links to his Upwork profile in the show notes because he was really, really good. And so I just paid him X amount per hour to spend time like doing all this research.
And I was on the peripheral. I'm watching all of this stuff go down. I'm seeing some of either your emails or the posts that are happening from the Fame account asking for us to help not intervene, but help tap people on the shoulder. And what I'm thinking to myself is, what is going through Tom's head right now? Because I know you're obviously scrambling. And one of the things that you've already said is like, my livelihood, like my business is on LinkedIn right now. And so this meant everything. And I remember I was having a meeting with Jay. We're obviously a client of Tom and Fame, a very, very, very happy client. And talking to Jay, and I'm like, hey, like, what's Tom doing right now? Is he just like doing laps around the office? Is he just pacing back and forth? Like what? And he's like, I don't know. He seems okay. But like, I probably wouldn't have been okay in that. And so like, what's going through your mind when you're like, everything that I've built over the last 3 years to get to this stage, to have posts that are getting thousands, if not tens of thousands of likes, millions of impressions. And like, now all that is out the window. What's going on?
Yeah, I think it was hard to focus on other things because this was basically whenever I'm doing work on the business, I'm like, what's the next big thing that's going to move the business forward? And until there was literally no doors open, getting the LinkedIn profile back was always the biggest thing. And so I spent literally like 50% of my day probably on this project, like researching or doing work or writing emails, etc. So I had that to focus on. But it was still like, I don't think I was a very good company, like for the past 6 weeks. What I did, because I just got, I don't know, it was like I went into wartime mode. So I like stopped drinking alcohol. I stopped drinking coffee, got in the best shape of my life because exercising like twice a day. So like looking back at it, it was actually like a really positive, or like I learned a lot and I developed a lot. But during it was like very dark because not only it's super useful for Fame, primarily not on the customer side, but on the hiring side. And so as you're growing, or a crucial part of any service business is, as you know, is bringing on the right people. And so that kind of account manager, which is the key role for us, pipeline was like drying up. And so this was like the big stressful factor. But overall, looking back, I'm happy. It was a good experience.
And so some of those things you just talked about are incredibly good habits to continue. When you got all this put back together, maybe you popped some champagne, but are you staying on that routine, or are you like, no, it was good for the stressful periods, but now I'm ready to go back to normal?
I feel like when things are going better, I get a little bit like more sloppy. Like I'll drink more, or like drink more coffee, or eat more carbs. Which this week, so I've had it back since Monday, if not Thursday. This week I've been okay. But yeah, I haven't celebrated yet. Maybe celebrate this weekend.
Got it. And when was it? It was Sunday that you posted with the chair post.
Yeah. So it went down on the 10th of June, and then 28th of July, I got it back.
Okay.
Do you want to hear the story behind the chair post? Because
I do. I had to hear it. And so like, I know, but I only know because, I forget. So someone on your team told me, but yes, like what is the meaning behind that?
Oh God, yeah. So you know the GameStop saga. There's a guy called Roaring Kitty who was big on Reddit, YouTube, and Twitter, and he was mainly responsible for blowing up that stock because he put these big bets on and it was going up. This is in 2021, like COVID times. But then, as that whole thing unwound itself, he had to testify in front of Congress and probably got in some kind of legal battle. That was 2021. No one hears from him for 3 years until 2 months ago, he posts this one image on Twitter, which is just a meme of somebody sitting back in their chair with a game controller and then like an arrow showing them moving forward. Because that's what you do if you're ever playing a video game, you always like sit forward when things get serious. And it's actually a meme posted by the French PlayStation account like 5 years ago. And the caption was like, when the game gets serious. So he posted that. And so I was like, following that whole saga is amazing. So I was like, okay, I'm just going to do that. We changed the colors to Fame colors and then posted that. I mean, that like it was quite a funny post, but if you look at the performance of it compared to any other post, it didn't perform very well, obviously, because it's quite a niche in joke.
But that's very personal, right? Like who cares if nobody gets it? Because you just got your account back. So now you've got all this time. It's more for you and your headspace to be locked on.
Yeah, exactly.
I am curious about kind of the future and where you see this going. But one of the things that actually, let's get into the future and where this is going. Well, actually, no. What lessons did you learn? So when we think about, like, you had a lot of your business kind of tied up, and it sounds like not on the client side or not on business development. I'm sure it helps tremendously with business development, but it sounds like you utilize LinkedIn quite a bit for talent. This reminds me of many of my past businesses and different channels that we relied upon that we didn't necessarily have control over. So one of those was Facebook. We used to spend at Hunt to Killer, we would spend 100, when Eric Carlson was running it, there was probably one time we were spending $150,000 per day on Facebook advertising. Apple comes through, iOS 14.5, blows everything up, algorithms are destroyed, and now we have a very inefficient and ineffective advertising channel, and that's where 90% of our revenue came from. And like that was a pretty tough lesson in like when you don't control it. Had a similar thing happen with a company I used to have called Run for Your Lives. And it was, again, Facebook, but it was before advertising and it was groups. And so we relied upon the groups to be able to get the word and the followings of the page, because when you would post, everybody would see it. And then they developed advertising, started selling attention. But twice I've been burned by this. So when you look back on this experience and what you've gone through, like, what are the lessons learned and what are some of the things that you're starting to think about now as far as moving forward?
Yeah, the age-old like challenge with owning the permission asset on any social platform. You don't really own that permission asset. It can be taken away any time. Whereas email, 100%, like, is only a spam folder that sits between you. Like, no one can take that subscriber away. And podcast is like kind of like that, because most people do listen to podcasts through Apple and Spotify, but they very rarely will ban you from their platform. So it's like moving people from these social channels to own channels is obviously something we should do. But then diversifying our sources for both hiring and customers is something that the ops team and the growth team now have projects to do. In terms of what I learned about myself, here's quite a personal thing, but I'm trying to learn Italian, and part of that is watching this TV program, absolutely banging show called Gomorrah, which is about the mafia in Naples. Anyway, it's like 4 seasons, beautifully shot, but there's like these 2 main characters who are like the 2 gangsters coming up in the game. And most, like every other episode, something really bad happens to one of them, like not losing their LinkedIn profile, but their wife or child is going to get killed, you know? And they just go through hell throughout like every episode of all these series. And there's this song that's played at the end of every episode, typically as the characters either like won something or they're going through hell. And so I've been listening to that song a lot, and we can link to it below. But that is just kind of reminding me that actually, even if things are really hard, if you focus like these characters were doing in that series, so you can typically get a good outcome in the end. It's like persistence, I think, was a personal lesson from it.
Yep. I agree. When I look at this as resilience, I think one of the fundamentals, like it's there's no negotiation for this. Like, entrepreneurs have to be resilient because you're going to get knocked down every single day, and you have to be able to get back up. And like some of the problems that we face, like in your story, it takes a lot of work and a lot of effort. Like, and the interesting thing here is, it's hard to explain, because like when you don't have control over a situation and like all you can do is keep trying, it is absolutely one of the worst feelings out there. Because like all you can give is your effort. All you can do is like solve the next problem. But at the end of the day, like you don't have control over the outcomes. Not to rub it in, but I've felt that. And it's just like this hopeless, helpless feeling. And you're doing everything you can to survive, solve the problem, and not do bad things.
Exactly. And the key, the other key thing to remember when like going into a crisis like that is that you have to be, obviously you're going to take significant and often extreme action, but you have to be a little bit cautious in that some of those actions you take could actually make the situation worse. And so I definitely did things like, one example of paying the $2,400 to get the copyright, like that did make the situation worse because the business had $2,400 less dollars. Now, obviously that risk wasn't too significant, but there are other things like other legal risks I probably took that could have had worse impact. So I think that was a learning as well. Like, try not to like spiral down this loop once you've had one like minor loss, and try to get back to where you were, but not go further down.
Yeah. And how do you lead a team during this? Because like we're talking all about the problem. Like, you still have a business to run. So like, yes, you've got this crisis going on over here. Like you've got to solve it. You also have to lead your team. And so like, what did that look like? How did you keep on probably a happy face? Because I'll tell you, Jay was like, no, I don't. Not that he said like, I don't think he cares, but like he was like, I really haven't noticed a difference. So you were obviously like holding it together for the team while at the same time, maybe a little bit of panic / a lot of crisis mode on the side.
It's got to be, this is like the thing you have to be as an entrepreneur. You have to be like a psychopath, you know, like you have to put it completely out of your mind. And I think this is the thing for like any entrepreneur, like anything goes wrong in the company, you have to be quite careful about how you seem or communicate to other people in your business. There's just another test like that. I think, yeah, I probably did some meetings I just canceled, took out of the calendar. And I probably was a little bit like less enthusiastic, a little bit distracted. I think I did an okay job.
Got it. So like getting back into like growing your presence. So we're getting into the good stuff and not necessarily the adversity and the resiliency. You talked a little bit earlier about this idea that you chose HR as kind of like that niche. You've also chose a very positive tone. And that's something different that maybe a path that we're taking my account down right now, which is being a little bit more controversial, but mostly making recruiters mad so that we can talk about the incredible things that we do at Talent Harbor. But you take a very positive tone. How did you choose the HR? How did you choose the tone of the account? Like what went into that decision making?
Yeah, so HR, there's like 3 pillars: business, marketing, HR. But HR is the one that gets the most attention on LinkedIn, so that's where I focus. My theory here is that to make it work on LinkedIn, you have to choose, ideally, all your pillars align with 3 things. So are you doing it every day? Are you interested in it? And can you make money from it? Now, for the past 5 years on LinkedIn, I've been talking about marketing. Now, as I've grown in my role in the company as CEO and I have a head of growth, I'm actually not really doing marketing anymore. So I kind of had to shift away from that anyway, because I wasn't learning so much about it. And so then I was shifting more into business and HR. And so I'm interested in it. I'm doing it every day. And the problem with the HR one is that we can't really make money from it. Or like less on the customer side, but it does help with hiring. And so the absolute ideal business for me to run right now, it would be a business like yours or something related to HR. And that could happen in the future, right, as I build this audience. So the caveat to those 3 rules is that there are specific things on LinkedIn that just work. And so within HR, it's culture, leadership, management, remote work. That's like one cluster of things that work really well, as you know. There are other smaller clusters, e.g. like LinkedIn, like talking about how to do stuff on LinkedIn, that obviously works really well as well. And there are probably some other things that I'm missing. So really, you have to get those 3 things right. Are you doing it every day? Are you interested in it? And can you make money from it? And then if you can layer on those topics that are hot on LinkedIn, then that's how you really blow it fast.
And when you say every day, like, are you actually talking like 7 days a week, or is the consistency like same time, same days each week, and 3 to 5 is okay? Like when you think about that, how do you reconcile?
To grow fast, you need to post every day, 7 days a week, and it probably doesn't have to be down to the minute, but it does need to be at a similar time. People will like ideally get in a habit of waiting for your post and then commenting. There's one guy that emailed me the day after the ban, and he was like, "Tom, where's your post?" That like shows that you do actually. You're the only one. It shows that you do have some fans.
That's awesome. And like, is it one of these things that eventually snowballs? So like once you start getting traction, like you've been posting every day, and I think for you it took 2 years, 3 years. Like how long did it take until you were like, we've got traction now?
Yeah, 3 years posting pretty much every day. And it was only in March of this year they started to blow up. And the reason it did was similar to what I was saying at the very start of this interview, is that to grow fast, basically the algorithm is looking at your previous posts to be like, how many people should I show this new post to in this testing period? And so to grow fast, you have to have bangers every day. And so you can't afford to post to release one that flops. And so the way you do that is researching other like hooks or content, like themes or topics that have done well previously. And then, as we've learned, put that in your own words, or like make that your own and then post that. And that was a realization in March that has really enabled it to go faster.
Gotcha. And then what about the picture? I see your picture so dang much. That's why I made a joke. I think I was talking to Ayub yesterday, and I was like, hey, can we just use Tom's picture for this post that we're going to do? The beach one, beach one. And I'm assuming that there is something also in the algorithms in which like you got to get a photo in there as well.
Single image with the person in is, since I started going hard at this, which is 2024 has worked. It could change in the future. Now, the other thing I've noticed is that if that person is kind of like I am in the screen right now, like the face is like a X portion of the screen, I also think that just gets boosted. It's strange. I found this out that we were in Istanbul and a cheesecake cafe, and my girlfriend, who was amazing, all those pictures, she used to be a photographer. That's one of the reasons why I think the photos are nice. She did this photo of me. And whenever I do a post from that cafe, and because my face is like X proportion of the screen, it just pops. And so that's something else that I would recommend. Now, the problem here is that you get a lot of people being like, why are you talking about firing someone? And then the picture of you and your dog there. These are just sacrifices you have to make if you want to grow, I think, looking like an idiot. So single image with you in will help you with the algorithm. And the other thing, if we zoom out, what are we really trying to do here? We're trying to get other people to know you when you don't know them. That enables your influence over them. What better way to do that than for them to look at your picture every day? So it also helps with the influence there. One other thing I've learned, I was thinking about this today. If you're trying to put up on LinkedIn, it's every post should just have one single message that you're trying to portray. And a key skill is taking the piece of content or the story and then pulling out the message that's going to resonate. So I did a post today, which I think is doing quite well. And it was essentially about somebody for the first time ever, seeing me in real life from LinkedIn and coming up with hey, Tom, are you from LinkedIn, etc. And so I could have, if we think about, I saw the post. Cool. So first we got a single image with two people in there. So it's probably going to help. Not the best picture, but it was a picture of that situation. So it's relevant to the post, which is good. But the question there is, if I just post that picture and say, hey, someone recognized me on LinkedIn, it'll probably get a few likes, but no one really cares about that, And so the way I think this post is now doing better is because I told a little story at the start to get people interested. Starting post with a little story at the top always pops off. But then the kind of ethos there is that guy, I never heard of him before, and he never commented or liked on any posts. And so the core message I was trying to get across was you creators keep posting because there's all these people that you'll never know that you're impacting and you're improving their lives of. Because the guy came up and said, hey, I'm bootstrapping my own company. You've been really inspirational for me. And so that's a key skill, I think, is pulling out the thing that the audience actually cares about and making that only one point in that post. So that's something that I was just thinking about today.
I love that. And to your point of people, I think you even called them in your post today, lurkers. And when I think about the amount of times that I scroll and I take no action, I don't like it, I don't comment, I don't do anything, but I still consumed it. Thinking about how many impressions that we have on people. And sometimes it comes up in conversations, people that I haven't connected with in years kind of know my story and know kind of where I'm at professionally at this point. And it's because they follow, but I haven't heard from them. They haven't been in my DMs. They haven't liked the post. They haven't done anything. And so I agree with you. I'm by no stretch anywhere close to the status of was it a soccer game? What were you walking out of?
Oh yeah. So it was out of the fan zone in Lisbon for Euro 2024.
Got it. So by no stretch am I walking out of a football stadium and someone's like, oh, I saw your LinkedIn post. But yet, I agree. Brian. Not yet. Well, there we go. When you talk about the comments that are in there. So let's use one of the comments of hey, you got a picture of your dog. You're talking about firing people. What gives? There's also it gets much worse than that in the comment section. But as you're scaling, you have to grow thick skin or become accustomed. My tactic is I never look at the comments and I can't. But how do you deal with that? Especially when you were growing your own account and you were starting to get to that inflection point and there's toxic people out there.
Yeah, my view here is that it's very easy to say, but you have to step back and try and be less emotional about it. If you have a post with 200 comments and there are 5 calling you an idiot, you can probably logically be okay, this is probably fine. And the upside is that those 5 comments helping your post get seen by more people. And so actually quite a good strategy is to reply to those 5 comments in a way that is not like being offensive to them, but kind of draws even more comments. It's just signaling to the algorithm that the content is interesting. And so it's like stepping back, being like, okay, it's only like 2.5%, plus it's helping me get this post seen more. Now there's probably only one post that I've deleted myself because of the reaction. And it was a post about firing someone. The ethos of the post, I think, needs to be heard, which is that firing should be like a fair process. You know, that it shouldn't be just like surprise someone and get rid of them. It should be like, okay, this is not working. I'll help you find another job, you know? And so that's a great message. However, the hook of the post was like, I fired someone yesterday. And so it was more than 2.5%. It was maybe 25% of the comments were like, why are you bragging about firing someone? So at that point, I was like, okay, I'll delete it. That's totally fair enough. But if it's only less than 5%, then we should use this to our advantage.
Got it. So making certain people who aren't your target client profile is okay to be able to increase the engagement and get it into the window panes of people that need to see it.
Exactly, which is what you're doing really well at the moment with your post, by the way.
We're doing very well. Thank you. What one thing that I saw, I don't know if it had to be a recent post of yours. I think it was a recent post, but you talked about your growth, and it was like 2 years or 3 years to get to $1 million. And then it was like, then the rest was history. Like what happened? Why? And was this Fame? Actually, maybe we should start with the story. You run Fame. What's the background? What's the story? And then I'd like to get into how much effort it took to get to $1 million, and then why that boulder feels like it's going down the other side of the hill now.
So I spent like 8 years trying to sell things on the internet, and building businesses, because I basically realized I couldn't be employed, so I had to be an entrepreneur. And I couldn't code, so I was like, okay, I need to market, and I wanted to do it on the internet. So online marketing is basically what I did for 8 years. Started loads of stuff, like 14 things, and nothing really worked. And so then 1 year I was like, take a break because I didn't have any money to work at my friend's company as head of demand generation, because I learned enough about marketing by then. And this was 2018, and we all sold sales software. And so the masterstroke was to start a sales operations podcast to focus on this customer persona that I thought we should target. So long story short, that showed it really well for my ex-employer. And fortunately, when I said I want to go and do this full time, they said, yeah, we'll be your first client. So shout out to Epster.com. And then all we've done, there's one guy called Clay in the Philippines who was in my team at Epster. He came with me. And then all we've done since then is just tweak and improve that process, and now implement it for roughly 100 clients. But you're totally right. It took, I think, to get to 1 million AR would have been maybe 3 years, 2-3 years. So the grind. But then we've been able to go from 1 to 4 in maybe 2 years. So your question was why do you think it took so long? I think what I'm most curious about, because it's hard, and I think a lot of times like we discount how hard it is to get to $1 million. But the thing that's fascinating is with your story is like once you got to $1 million, like then things started moving very fast. And you know what is kind of the calls? Like, have you identified something? You're like, oh, it was definitely this. Like these 3 things kind of came together around the same point. We were just starting to get momentum. What was it for you? So I think and I'm just getting out now. I think Jim Collins has a concept called the flywheel, which is essentially what Jeff Bezos uses at Amazon as well. And I only codified this in a diagram last month. It was actually, whilst the LinkedIn was down, I was like, okay, I'll read all these Jim Collins business books. Anyway, so I think this is probably the biggest reason. Well, actually, this and my LinkedIn are the 2 reasons why we're able to go so fast. I think when the LinkedIn popped off, maybe it was like 3. And so it went to 3 to 4 in quite a small amount of time, maybe 6 months. And that was not largely, but that was helped by LinkedIn for sure. But the reason why I think it got better is because the flywheel I'll talk about in a second, we now can turn it much faster than we were able to do 2 or 3 years ago. So I'll quickly explain the flywheel. And this it's nothing about podcasts, so it can be applied to any service business, I think. So first we have to acquire clients cheaply, e.g. not spend loads on marketing to acquire them. I'll explain why in a second. Now, obviously, once we've done that, we need to hire and train great values aligned people. And then once we've done that, we need to make sure we're improving the service every time. And that will happen if we have the right people. And then obviously we need to make the clients happy. That's step 4. Now, going back to acquiring clients cheaply, it's much easier to acquire clients cheaply if our prices are not super high, because we haven't spent loads on acquisition. And so once we've then made the clients happy, we will then get more referrals, more case studies, more word of mouth, and more virality. There is some virality in our service. I can explain that if needed. And then obviously all that stuff will lead to acquiring clients more cheaper. And so that just keeps going and going. Now, obviously, when we're like 1 million and we had maybe 15 clients, we weren't as good at acquiring clients cheaply. We weren't as good at hiring great value line people. Service wasn't as good. Clients weren't as happy. And so we weren't getting as many referrals, etc. So we weren't, that then was making the flywheel slow down. But then when we got to 3 million and we've been improving all those things for 3 years, it started to speed up. So I think it's super important for anybody trying to get to 1 and then like beyond 1 million is to try and identify what the flywheel is. And then that's really the focus of your time, the entrepreneur, is to put people in place, or you yourself go and improve those different aspects of the flywheel. So that plus LinkedIn, I think, is the reason why it got easier to grow later in the life of the company.
Gotcha. And when you're going through some of this, I've heard it referred to sometimes as whitewater. So whitewater, where like your systems and your processes that you built for a $1 million business aren't necessarily holding up for a $3 million business. Like, what did that mean for you? When you look at this flywheel, are you looking for like which parts are being stress tested and which ones are kind of breaking, and then you're focusing on those and kind of patching that up? Like, how did you kind of fix these systems as you were growing? Yeah,
so I don't think I would look for them. It's like very obvious, the problem, because either the clients are not happy, the team are not happy, or the freelancers are not happy, or the partners are not happy, or the shareholders, in this case, just me, are not happy. And so your job, I think, as the entrepreneur or the CEO is to understand the happiness of the 4 or 5 different parties, and then build a solution in the middle that makes everybody sufficiently happy. Now, you can't make them all 100% happy because that's not possible. And so let's just say like churn would tick up, customer churn would tick up in a quarter. Then we'd be like, okay, so maybe we need to not increase the prices, but increase our salary band for the account managers to bring on more experienced or high quality account managers. So that's an example of that. With the ops function, like this happened 1 to 2 months ago with our finance function. Like, we're probably quite underinvested in finance, I would say, and we're just using spreadsheets, don't really know how to use Xero. And so when you have to like manually create 100 invoices a month and like loads of mistakes, and so then we're like, okay, how do we simplify this? Maybe bring in a slightly more experienced finance person into that role. So yeah, it's not easy to see the issues. It's more about how can you tweak the system that you've built to rebalance the happiness. It's like super easy to probably make the shareholders happy because you just increase prices, cut pay, or don't give pay rises. But then that's quite short-term happiness for the shareholders because in a year you might not have a business. And so this is what I try to think about, is how to make all these different parties happy.
You talked a little bit about virality from a marketing standpoint. Like, how are you building virality into your experience, into your products?
Yeah, call it service-led growth. I'm super our biggest belief of fame is retention is the foundation of growth. And obviously because you get more word of mouth and more referrals, and then you can acquire clients cheaply, it really helps our flywheel. And so then also, as you're retaining those customers, if they can expose other potential customers to your service just through the use of your products or service, and that is obviously going to help. Now in SaaS, it is quite well documented because you can, the best example I have is there's a mind mapping software, you pay $30 a month, but then you publish your mind maps and have this massive mind map database that ranks really well for SEO, and then all that traffic is exposed to the software, right? And so that's a great example. A little bit tricky in services. What we have done is for every show we have, in the show notes right at the bottom, it's like this show is handcrafted by Fame. If the client doesn't want it there, we take it out. That's absolutely fine, but that's default in. So that's one thing. When we launch a show, we'll post about it from our LinkedIn page, and then we typically will get a client, or what the client's comment or sometimes share. And sometimes when they share, they'll tag us. So that's another example of virality. So it's for service business, how can you have your client expose other potential clients to you, to your brand, as they're going in the as they're using your service. And so I call that service-led growth, or virality, another term.
And when you think about growth, like there's a couple different ways to think about it. You can grow the products or the service that you have. You can start to introduce new products and services. You have chosen to introduce some new services, and obviously, like, these services are right up your wheelhouse, and very much a competency that you guys have. How do you, when you think about growth of the company, like, how big you trying to get, and how many different services are you trying to have?
Really good question. Next milestone is $10 million a year, so we have to go from 4 to 10. I think we can get to 10 with our current service offering. And so we have our main service, which is the podcast service, and then we have 4 supporting services, which is help with social, email, booking clients on other podcasts, and then internal podcasts. The reason why I would structure it that way, instead of just having 5 services, is because I think a key part of our success is just having super crystal clear positioning. E.g., we are the B2B podcast agency. Now, as soon as I actually did test this out when we launched these new services early in the year, we basically become like a audience growth agency, or like a audience first demand generation agency. Now, no one knows what those two things are, And so I tested it, and we saw like a drop in proposal request. So I'm like, I don't think we need to do that to get to 10. So let's just focus on what we do best and keep the positioning that we've had and that's worked for the past 4 years. And then just have these supporting services that we don't necessarily market for. But if we have a client that comes in and we think we can help them with this, then we'll offer it to them.
Got it. And you said something there that that both resonated and we are thinking about on a weekly, if not a daily basis. And it's this idea of like getting a crystal clear message. And in B2C, I won't say it was easy, but it was fast because you've got enough traffic coming to a website and you're looking at specific actions that people are taking on a website. But you need a certain amount of traffic to a website to prove or validate with some sort of statistical significance. In B2B, like when you've got a new idea, it's like, well, you've got to go talk to 15 clients and like you have to read their facial expressions and like, oh, well, like they haven't pulled out their wallet yet, but they said they're excited. But are they really excited if they haven't actually paid for the services? So 2 questions. One is you have obviously found it. Like you have found a way to get crystal clear with that message. How did you discover that? How did you validate that? And then we'll get to the next one. How do you do that?
So I think it's a super good way to validate and start a business. Yeah, and it only really works for B2B, is you have a job and you probably do like involved in maybe 5 to 10 processes in your job, get really, really good and practice getting really good at one of those processes in your job for a year, and then tell them you're leaving and say you'll operate that process for them at some kind of cost that they think is palatable. The other advantage there is when most people leave a company, the message that gives to the other company is not a good one, unless you can say this person's staying on to do this thing, and so there's kind of upside for the company there as well. And so I was able to validate that this process could be profitable for a B2B company without taking any risk. So that was validating the service. Then the other 2 things to validate was like the positioning of the company and then like the tagline or how we sold it. And so the tagline and the way we sell hasn't really changed since we started the company. And maybe I was just able to get it quite close or right initially because I'd done online marketing for 8 years. But I basically just say like what we are and what we can do for your company. So we're the B2B podcast agency. We start and grow podcasts for B2B brands, and we make the most profitable B2B podcasts in the world. So it's like quite kind of clear, but it was just, I think that's one tip I would give is like, don't try to be too like clever or new or like clever with your positioning. I would just try and say what you are. Now, obviously we benefited from the fact that B2B podcasts 5 years ago weren't really a thing and now they are. So we kind of were able to ride that wave, but that's a different entrepreneurial skill, isn't it?
Well, and why do you think that is? Is this just people are becoming more exposed to content? Everybody's jumping on where are the barriers to entry to start your own podcast? Is it the Riversides? Is it because fame exists and it's pushing out this message? Like, what do you think the reason is today of this explosion in podcasts?
I think the 2 core methods B2B companies used to use, and probably still are the 2 main methods to get customers, is outbound and running ads. As like technology's improved, everyone's getting bombarded with outbound all the time. And then as technology's improved for ads as well, it's so easy to run ads and target them. And so I think those two methods have got less good. And so then this other method of actually building an audience of people that know, like, and trust you has become something that works better. And part of that is building a audio audience or a podcast audience. So I think that's probably the reason why more and more people have been coming over to this way of doing marketing.
Got it. And have you talked about ads a little bit, like when you guys think about marketing, obviously it's been a lot of organic. It's been your page. It's been a podcast. Have you ever run ads?
Yeah. So we, again, like, I think it's like part skill, part timing, but Google has brought us the most customers, and roughly half paid, half organic, but like very simple stuff. Like if you Google B2B podcast agency, we're probably one of the top 3 organic results, probably one of the top 3 paid results. And so maybe we're kind of lucky that more and more people were searching for that. And at least in the early days, there wasn't that many competitors. So we got the head start, especially on organic. Like if we were starting this now, that wouldn't work so well. If we started with a Google Ads or a PPC agency back 5 years ago, it wouldn't have worked so well, So I think it was a combination of getting the timing right, but also I had 8 years of online marketing, so I could do the Google Ads relatively well and then do the SEO relatively well. So no other paid has worked for us apart from the intent of the Google Ads. I think it's going to be, well, we've obviously tried it, but I think it's quite hard to convince a business to start a podcast if they're not already thinking about doing it. And so the direct response ads are just not going to work. And so our strategy, apart from like capturing the demand through Google organic and paid of people that actually are showing intent to start a B2B podcast, our other strategy is to create demand or just like capture the attention of people that will have future demand, which is LinkedIn and my podcast.
Interesting. I was going to ask about if you guys have tried LinkedIn, but that makes a lot of sense when you talk about the purchase intent. Like there, you're kind of advertising and you're more pushing. With search strategy, people are already searching for it, so that makes a lot of sense. Last question, or at least last topic. Thanks for sticking with this for the last almost hour. How has the culture of your organization shifted? So obviously this was, I was going to say just you, but no, it wasn't just you. You brought one gentleman with you. So it was 2 of you in the beginning. Today it is more than 2. And like, how has that culture evolved, and how have you ensured that there hasn't been a degradation into like your vision of what this should look like and how people should be and act?
Good question. I think the culture, I don't really know how to describe it. I think the culture is good. I think the culture is quite friendly. And how have we done that? I think it's probably credit to the people that have done most of the hiring, which actually isn't me anymore. I've kind of obviously probably hired involved in hiring the first 20 people. But since then, it's been other people on the team. And so I would say that, I'll give them credit. And the tool that we've also given them to ensure this is the values. Because like the answer everyone gives, right? You hire for the values, fire for the values, and then bonus people on the values. I think that is actually true though. So we're looking for these 4 values when we hire people. If someone goes into the performance process, it could be because they're not living up to these 4 values. And then we also have things like, it's called a FVA, a Fame Values Award, where anybody in the team can give anybody else a $50 bonus for living up to the values. I think it's probably that, which has helped to drive the culture, even though I'm not face-to-face or like showing how I think people should behave with most people anymore. Got it.
I want to put you on the spot for what are your core values? Not because I'm not trying to stump you on the spot, but I am curious of what your core values are. And I love that strategy, and I'd love to talk about that for like half a second. But what are your core values?
Yeah, for sure. And I should know them because I literally used in the team meetings. I'd be like just calling out random people, be like, what are the values? So the first one is client, essentially like similar to Amazon's customer assess one. So always try and do what's best for the client. Action bias, so take action before thinking too much so we can learn. Operational excellence, obviously with a service business, you need to have good procedures and follow them. And then finally is growth obsessed. So obsessed with growing ourselves, which would then mean that we'll grow clients, podcasts, which will then mean that Fame will grow. And then that enables us to help people grow more.
I love that. And you're not even on EOS. So these were our core values. I still have them, but we had them framed.
Yes.
And you matter, we deliver. And then we had descriptions for each of those. And every single week we would get the team together, and not to waste their time, but we would take 30 minutes and we would just talk about kind of the wins for the week, some of the things, challenges, areas that we were focusing on. And we would go over our core values. And like you, we would call out people, and it wasn't about like calling them out and say like, oh, great job with You Matter. Like there was a specific example, because trying to take something that's in writing and making it something that is tangible, which people can look at and say that is the action that demonstrated this core value, is incredibly powerful. So you're not even on EOS, and you're operating like EOS, which is good.
Yeah, I think maybe the team haven't shared with you fully, but I think we're probably running on like 65% EOS. Like read the book, implemented, but not everything. Like obviously, as you're probably aware, like it's like most people are not on 100%, But I think we're on 65. We have like some of the core things. Like the people analyzer is a great exercise. That's probably my favorite one.
Yes, it is. And we just did a whole webinar yesterday on this. And so like when you were talking about core values and hiring for core values, like the people analyzer is incredible, but those people are already inside of your organization. So if you're looking at it and you're like, oh, plus and plus minus and minus and plus plus, or whatever the case may be, like now you have a problem that you have to deal with. And if you can start to bring those tools and principles into the hiring process, all the much better. And so I loved when you were talking about, when you think about interviews, you're interviewing for core values, who they are, how they come to work, how they behave. So anyhow, all right. Well, now this is truly the last question, and this one is right off the script. Admittedly, nothing else today has been right off the script, but this one will be right off the script, which is who in your entrepreneurial network would you most like to meet for coffee?
Ooh, good question. I think it's probably like in the network already. It's probably one of I know who it is, right? So there's this guy, you might have seen, it's called Stephen Watson. Actually, he commented on your post, one of your posts this week. And what Stephen does is he writes posts like similar to mine, but like taking the piss completely. And they're absolutely hilarious. And he is doing really well on LinkedIn at the moment. And we were actually going to meet for coffee, but we never did it. So I think it would be him, because I think it would be absolutely hilarious.
That's awesome. Awesome. All right, Tom, thank you so much for the time. Just like an L10 meeting, start on time, end on time. It's 11 o'clock, but thank you for coming on. So many valuable things, how to grow your profile, how to deal with adversity. I know I learned a lot, but appreciate you, and we'll talk soon.
Thanks so much, Ryan. Looking forward to seeing you blow up on LinkedIn. Yeah, perfectly timed this meeting.
I know. I think it was like we planned this all along. It was all planned. All right. Thanks so much, Tom. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Ryan.
Confessions of an EOS Implementer is brought to you by Talent Harbor. To find out more about Talent Harbor and our fractional services and talent search solutions for businesses that operate on EOS, visit talentharbor.com. And then make sure to search for EOS Implementer in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Google Podcasts, or anywhere else podcasts are found. Make sure to click subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. And on behalf of the team here at Talent Harbor, thanks for listening.